Chapter 945. Xianhu, the Lord of Xianhu. For Luo Nan, who had just left the relay station, this was already a symbolic name. It was the most important landmark in the history of the Heavenly Yuan Empire. There was no other. Luo Nan's knowledge of the Lord of Xianhu's life was still rather vague due to the severe limitations of his knowledge regarding sacrifice. All he knew was that he was the founder of the Heavenly Yuan Empire, one of the most powerful beings in the universe. In fact, in the history of the Heavenly Yuan Empire, there was nothing wrong with the label of the Lord of Xianhu being the most powerful being. Luo Nan's lack of knowledge regarding the history of the Heavenly Yuan Empire could only allow his thoughts to diverge to this degree. It was quite impossible for his eyes to be brimming with tears for the legacy of the founding emperor. Then he thought of something more realistic. Authority. Such a character. Such a large card. The external neuron's strict authority settings. Were there no restrictions in this aspect? Luo Nan didn't feel that there were too many authority restrictions in the relay station. It wasn't that the restrictions were loose. Instead, within the precise and complete system, many meaningless reminders or obstacles had already become formless. If you couldn't see it, then you couldn't see it. Basically, you wouldn't be given a corresponding mission. However, Luo Nan had soaked in it for a long time. He had a certain understanding of the authority of the Heavenly Yuan Empire. It could be said that there were differences in levels. From Luo Nan's perspective, the social hierarchy and authority system of the Heavenly Yuan Empire was a rather typical multi-channel model. Within the strict hierarchical division, several specialized channels were open to allow them to operate in parallel. The most common ones included the nobility system, the professional system, and the knowledge system. Some of these were specialized nouns. Luo Nan could only roughly translate and understand them. Officer, nobility. These were the system of military service officials. Bachelor, technician, teacher. These were the system of social professions. General, specialist, heaven ladder. These were the system of academic knowledge. Basically, they were all rank 3, rank 9. In addition, there was a series of complicated cultivation orders. But in general, they could be summarized into 3 stages. Namely, internal cultivation, smelting, and innovation. Mentally, Luo Nan corresponded them with the awakened, architect, and extraordinary of the inner world system. These channels were either parallel or intersecting. Together, they formed the solid talent structure and knowledge system of the Heavenly Yuan Empire, as well as strict value judgments. The knowledge of configuration and creation that Luo Nan had learned was incorporated into it. Each had a precondition and a continuation, forming a complete hierarchy of learning and research. The special point here was that the innovation in the cultivation system was often confused with the ladder to heaven in the academic knowledge system. The reason for this was that the first level of the celestial stairway was the most special. It was a stage of innovation in learning and cultivation, and it was the exploration and summary of the Dharma and logos of the universe. It was boundlessly profound, and it wasn't something that could be covered by just 3 levels. Therefore, every 100 years, the ranking of the Heaven Stairway would be discussed by the various academies and research institutes of the Heavenly Yuan Empire. Then the Senate would decide whether to increase or decrease the ranking. Ever since the establishment of the Heavenly Yuan Empire, the Heaven Stairway had grown from the most primitive 3 steps to the 13 steps that Luo Nan knew of. It had grown by a full 10 steps. Every increase in level represented great progress in the research and cultivation system of the Imperium. Moreover, it was said that almost the same number of times of reduction was hidden within, further proving the solid and rigorous side of this system. And above this ranking system was the level of Grand Monarch. The reason why it transcended above was because the level of Grand Monarch was the true transcendent realm, the immortal power, and the study that transcended limits. Aside from a portion of knowledge laws that were integrated into the 13 steps of the Heaven Stairway, the general cultivation order and standards were already quite different from the understanding of ordinary people. Luo Nan had yet to come into contact with the specific content, so he had no way of talking about it. From this point of view, the initial privileges of the external neuron were set at the NCO rank for resource transfer and expert-level knowledge search. This was already a mid-level authorization. Most of the high-level knowledge that Luo Nan had come into contact with at the relay station was at this level. As for after passing the offline test, his knowledge access had risen to the 4th level of the celestial ladder, and what he had access to was already common knowledge that only teachers, dignitaries, and at the very least, elite officers had. Well, of course, special talents like Lieutenant Loaned were a different story. As for the domain involved in the 2 privileges, resource transfer and such, he was still muddle-headed. It seemed that it was related to the virtual brain systems analysis and the inner universes simulator. Comparatively speaking, pure knowledge search was the most suitable for the current Luonan. In any case, according to Luonan's understanding of the ranking system of the Heavenly Yuan Empire, the NCO rank and the Heaven Stairway rank were all fine. No matter how much one raised one's rank, they were still on the ordinary level within the Heavenly Yuan system. They were in the domain of comprehensible. Once they were linked to Lord Jianghu, they would instantly rise to an inconceivable level. Even though this thesis with a rather long title appeared to be only a portion of some great work, it seemed to be some thesis or teaching material upon closer inspection. There were elements of imparting knowledge, but was it really possible? It should be possible, Luonan said to himself. The privileges of the external neuron were both restrictions and insurance. So far it seemed that other than blocking him, testing him, and making things difficult for him, the external neuron basically maintained a good level of security. As for the others, according to Luonan's personal understanding and experience, he could clearly sense and understand the information on the level of information search and integration. Even though he only saw the title, the most important thing was that it had already come to this. What was he hesitating for? Luonan pondered and hesitated. In the end, he had the external neuron report that his privileges were insufficient. That would truly be a joke. Luonan laughed to himself. His mind relaxed, and his telepathic thoughts touched the results of the search. He tried to flip through the information on Lord Jianghu's article like he did with the lamination interference technology. Luonan's consciousness became slightly dazed in the next second. A pop-up window appeared on the virtual brain interface, but it passed in a flash. It seemed as if nothing had happened. And this work, elaborated by the highest-level author, had already been released to Luonan. He thought that he would have to read, translate, understand, and so on, but there was none. Only bright sparks of electricity suddenly flashed within the haze of the mental plane. Right now, Luonan's mental plane was filled with haze. The corrosive process of the sunwheel absolute hell and the sinful poison pollution was still ongoing, forming an endless dense fog. The imitation show of the heavily chained crow and the wraith sign was also gradually entering a fine state. Bright red light seeped through the depths of the chaotic fog, faintly illuminating the outline in some fragments. When the article transformed into zigzagging lightning and pierced into the fog, it collided with the chaotic scene. But there was no conflict. Instead, it was simply projected. It was like a unique printing machine. It used the fog as a medium to brush out group after group of bizarre graphic symbols. It looked like the eye that Luonan had inexplicably grasped. The secret sign was a combination of the central region's pictograms and highly generalized symbols. It was as if they came from the same source. There was no doubt that Luonan could not understand a single one of them. Even if he had the secret sign to translate, he would not be able to understand them in a short amount of time. But during this process he vaguely grasped a few things behind the scenes. The main thing was the external neuron that carried and activated the electricity. It was a few fragments of the operation of the black box. More accurately speaking, it was configuration, faith, and the great limit. A rational reconstruction of the evolution of history from ignorance to dawn, the magneto-optic mica chapter. This article had already transformed into electricity, and its source of information. This was because even at this time, the electro-optic printer was still drawing an endless stream of information from many channels and many directions. The information was then transformed into strange characters and symbols that filled the sky. Aside from the external neuron, there was also the half-decayed altar spiderweb, and even the sunwheel absolute hell. A considerable portion of this work of the Lord of Deep Harmony was actually extracted and precipitated from the flood of information from the sunwheel absolute hell. It was no wonder. It turned out that a considerable part of this content was completed from the outside world. At the very least, from Luonan's understanding of the situation, the external neuron's database didn't have an absolute advantage. Thus, the external neuron's own authority system was unable to restrain Luonan. It tacitly agreed that Luonan possessed the relevant authority. The number of electro-optic characters increased endlessly. But as the density increased, the flavor of the characters and symbols grew fainter and fainter. Instead, the appearance of a configuration design was vividly displayed. What followed was an even more concrete and detailed physical structure. From the characters to the configuration. From the configuration to the physical. From the abstract to the concrete. As he explored step by step, Luonan's consciousness began to dance along with it. In his daze, it was as if he had once again experienced the 70 hours of his life at the relay station. But this time the focus was different. His consciousness left the base and entered the vaster world. He looked at the towering structure of clouds that was like a ship in a mountain. He looked at how it made adjustments, how it summoned the Hellfire Tyrant, and how it mobilized its military forces. Of course, there was also the image of the Hellfire Tyrant, but it was much more blurry. In this way, not a single one of the three parties that clashed at the relay station was missed. They all fell into Luo Nan's eyes, allowing him to observe them from a comprehensive and objective perspective. Luo Nan had similar experiences during his offline tests, but he didn't understand them as clearly as he did now. In the end, Backtrack concluded with the exceptionally clear shadow cockroach. What was this? How could Luo Nan see the logic in this instant? But he faintly sensed that he could only approach things from the perspective of concrete images. The deeper level of jurisprudence might be fatal. Luo Nan found a good analogy. He was like Yin Lu's snake tongue and cat eyes of the past. He had entered a movie theater to experience the unfathomable demonstration of the rules. The movie finally came to an end. The lights lit up, but Luo Nan discovered that this wasn't a movie theater. He didn't return to that bewildering, chaotic, and foggy environment. His consciousness had actually led him into a grand and imposing hall. He couldn't see the structure of the palace too clearly. All he knew was that it was inconceivably vast and grand. There were no pillars or shadows blocking the way at all. All he could see were the numerous statues scattered about. There was also mist circulating within. Some of these statues were far away. Some were close. Some were blurry. Some were clear. Some were simply the mist itself. They would suddenly coalesce into form and then vanish into thin air. Chapter 946. It seems to be quite advanced. Right now, Luo Nan could calmly face all sorts of unexpected situations. Could there be a scene more inconceivable than this seemingly real relay station? His consciousness remained within the misty palace. He did not rush to a conclusion. Instead, he quietly waited, sensed, and observed this palace. In the end, he saw the origin of this palace and what it was supported by. Luo Nan observed for a period of time due to his limited cracking of the black box of the external neuron. He was basically certain that this misty palace was a product of information aggregation. It was just countless complex information and data that followed some mechanism to produce an image projection on the mental plane. This was not a preset program of the external neuron. It was more like Luo Nan was in full contact with the flood of information and data through multiple channels. It was a foundation of mutual compromise and passive choice. First was the hairy embryo formed from the aggregation of information structures. According to Luo Nan's current understanding, every information channel represented a type of information structure. The external neuron was the systematic storage of data. The Sunwheel Absolute Hell was the aggregation model of the shattered rules and information. The evil poison was a negative state that severely distorted the rules and information. There was also the alter spider web. It was a kind of intermediate state where information was transmitted, received, precipitated, and selected. The elements inside were even more complex. There were even millions and millions of living beings that had shallow or deep involvement and influence. It could be said that it was the place where the greatest variable was born. When they collided together, it would be fine if it was just a simple flow of information. It was very likely that they would influence and pollute each other. In the end, they would become completely chaotic and become meaningless noise. The problem was that these completely different information structures possessed rather stubborn and established patterns, yet they possessed a similar foundation in a certain sense. They possessed a relatively unified source, and the effects and infiltration they carried out on each other possessed the meaning of order and rules. Luo Nan could understand and utilize them. Luo Nan believed that this was a good phenomenon. It had great potential. Perhaps in the future, when he encountered more similar channels or information structures, he could handle them according to the rules and form a pattern? There was nothing much to say about the more specific things. This was because what drove these information channels to fully combine was an academic article written by Master Xianhu with an extremely long title. This could be considered a half-formed mold placed there. It naturally gathered and carried the powder of information. If he could pierce through this membrane, at least a bit of it would permeate through temporarily, allowing reason and reality to fuse into one. Only then could he be considered to have understood the work of the Master of Deep Harmony. Looking at it rationally, it was impossible for Luo Nan to do this in a short amount of time. However, this direction and train of thought could be used. He even had ready-made tools that he could use. From the looks of things, the lamination interference technique was simply the beggar version of this high-end direction. Tiske, Liang Lu. What should I say about you? Let's first simulate it and see how your results are. Which statue to start with? As Luonan was mulling over this, the external neuron transmitted a signal that did not harmonize with the misty palace environment. It was a distant communication. This time Luonan had no choice but to withdraw. He returned to the plane of reality, and Zhang Yingying transmitted a visual communication. Half of her pretty face was displayed, as well as the neatly stacked ice granules on a tray. Boss Luo, we're done here. Can you check and accept it? Luonan looked at his watch. Not even 2 hours had passed, and the old hands probably hadn't even finished making the mold. Not even Luonan could say anything about this efficiency. However, Luonan already had a plan for the follow-up. I sent you the assembly blueprints before. You can first assemble it according to them. Okay. Wait a moment. I'll change a few strokes first. Zhang Yingying nearly reached out and strangled Daddy Luonan, who wanted to change the plan before he could even accept it. Did he think that Her Majesty Empress Wu had outsourced the syncopation apparatus to him? Fortunately, Her Majesty Empress Wu went back to read and drink tea after she finished her work. Fortunately, Luonan had said to change a few strokes. It really didn't take too long. Very soon the assembly blueprint was sent over again. Although Zhang Yingying curled her lips and gritted her teeth, in the end she still worked obediently. Actually, she felt pretty good. Just as she said before, this was the first time she understood Luonan's train of thought. This meant that she had improved. Student Luonan had improved as well. It was no longer the murmur of an idiot, no longer an inhuman whisper. It had returned to a relatively clear logic, but it had a higher level of inner meaning. At least, that was how Zhang Yingying understood it. Luonan's visual communications were always on. He directed Zhang Yingying's assembly progress from a distance. Don't just use your hands. Follow up with your soul strength. Do you know telekinesis? Aren't you afraid of interference? There's still room for collaboration. Theoretically, it shouldn't be a problem for us to go in together. Hatue. Spatial structure is the most important thing. It's good to have that shape and precision, but it's fine if you don't stop. What happened? Maintain this state. And then? What's next? The sparkling and translucent ice granule structure suddenly stretched and deformed before Zhang Yingying's eyes. It was like a flying ant suddenly flapping its wings to float in the air. It even let out a buzzing sound. Hey, the frequency is too fast. Before Luonan's voice could fall, at least half of the ice syncopation apparatus exploded in midair. They transformed into a thin layer of water vapor and ice shards that assaulted Luonan's face. Zhang Yingying instinctively squinted her eyes. Her mouth cried out, "Oh no!" But when she focused her eyes to look again, a faint yet lifelike human silhouette appeared behind the water vapor. Chapter 947. You're here already? Zhang Yingying was a bit surprised. How complicated can it be? This is just a signal receiver. The power on my side is a bit higher. This side is a bit more sensitive. After connecting, I just need to make a kite string and connect them together. Luonan casually explained the basic principles. Actually, he had used this move a few months ago. Back then, he used the interference waves of the external neuron to transmit to Spring City. This time, he used the classic design of the Heavenly Yuan Empire to realize the long-distance projection, interference, and switching of mental psychic waves and electromagnetic waves. Kite flying? Zhang Yingying reluctantly accepted this explanation. But she had seen the water vapor avatar from before. Isn't it too rough? It's a bit worse than last time. Let's first solve the problem of having and not having. Then what do we do next? Accumulate advantages. Increase precision. Keep polishing. That's it. Luonan's blurry avatar lowered its head. It looked at the exploding ice shards and the disappearing water vapor. It felt a bit pained. I was a bit impatient just now. I used too much force. This syncopator is a bit brittle, but it's easy to use. What a pity. In the end, Luonan wasn't too familiar with this kite-flying method. From Zhang Yingying's point of view, Luonan's methods were already quite astonishing. A distance of several thousand kilometers and a high-speed moving target was coming as he wished. Even if there were a few prerequisites, it was no different from the legendary void shift. Using this method, the phenomenon of overloading was normal. She took the initiative to say, "I'll ask the boss to make some more for you." No need, no need. Luonan wasn't really floating. He was very clear about his own identity. I left 100 behind. Changing forms is more or less enough. Also, I want to learn Her Majesty's technique and see if I can do it myself. How else can you change? Zhang Yingying was just speaking without thinking. She didn't really care. She still wanted to provide Luonan with good conditions. Do you want me to find you a quiet place? No need. I've already found a good place. Luonan's blurry and weak outline of water vapor extended his arm and pointed at a sealed cabin wall. That's the engine room. Outside. Outside? The humidity of the air above the Pacific Ocean is quite ideal. Cloudy weather is the best. Luonan didn't wait for Zhang Yingying to react before asking, approximately when will we arrive? Zhang Yingying asked, where? D-City, of course. If it wasn't for you, we would have arrived long ago. If we turn around and speed up now, how about another hour and a half? That's fine. Luonan suddenly realized that Zhang Yingying's words were a bit strange. Where else could it be if not D-City? Zhang Yingying rolled her eyes at him. Look at the invitation, Luo Yuan. Was the auction going to be held in T-City? It was just a transit station. Actually, compared to D-City, our current location is much closer to our final destination. Then where is this? Nowhere, but less than 1,000 kilometers to the east is the Koror base. It's a satellite town of T-City and one of the most important hunting outposts in the Pacific Ocean. You mean? Let me tell you something. The Jadeite Light's last stop was to get supplies there. It will leave this afternoon and head northeast. It won't stop along the way. It will take around 30 hours to travel 2,000 kilometers before it arrives at the auction's location. Luonan recalled the world map he had learned before. He also recalled his experience of playing hide-and-seek with people in the Pacific Ocean a few months ago. He was able to determine the approximate location of the Jadeite Light. The boundaries between the limited space of perception and the limitless space of imagination were blurred through complex thinking. This was originally the most common situation, but ever since the soul cloak covered the entire world, it had been a long time since he had thought about the extension of space on the scale of Earth. But when he drew the psychic diagram, he would engage in a similar thinking game. He couldn't be partial to either. Once the future was placed on the scale of interstellar space, would he still need to rely on the soul cloak to traverse the vast distance measured in light years? Luonan hadn't found anything similar to the soul cloak within the huge amount of information he had come into contact with. However, there were pearls and jades in the past that utilized the power of perception and imagination to carry out ingenious operations in the field of space and time. The magnetic mica jellyfish was one of them. Luonan subconsciously retracted his hand and caressed the blurry vapor clone. Hey, what are you doing? What can I do? Luonan rolled his eyes, but Zhang Yingying couldn't see it. He simply asked, we'll reach T-City in an hour and a half. Where's the landing spot? Boss bought a private estate there. Huh. Is it far from the city? Where's the specific location? What do you mean? Time is tight. I made some things in T-City before, like the syncopator and the like. I want to ask someone to deliver them over. TSK, you're well prepared. Not bad. You should have told me earlier. Boss has a processing plant in T-City. We'll help you make it. Zhang Yingying suddenly realized something as she spoke. The Blood Flame Order. Speaking of which, how did you guys hook up? Didn't they collude with Bamboo Pole's old lover, Sun Jiai, to secretly make a move against you? I remember you asking about this. But you didn't reply. The main thing is that it's too complicated. Luonan found it hard to use simple, easy-to-understand words to explain this process. Zhang Yingying curled her lips. I understand. I don't pry into other people's privacy. But you can't go wrong being careful of the Black Widow. Ha! Luonan's mind spun in a circle before he realized that Zhang Yingying was referring to Mrs. Halder. Zhang Yingying reached out her hand. She carried curiosity and a reminder as she stroked Luonan's half-incorporeal neck. She had a smile that wasn't a smile. She's a beautiful witch. Yes, but she's also a ruthless person who could bite off her husband's head. You don't need me to remind you of this, right? Luonan thought of Mrs. Halder's various actions over the past few months and sighed from the bottom of his heart. Yes, I've seen her. See your ass. Rip. Zhang Yingying turned her hand and sliced across Luonan's neck. Unfortunately, it was still lacking in texture. So she didn't continue to dwell on this issue and waste Luonan's time. The Blood Flame orders express delivery, right? I'll talk to the estate and have them come directly. Many thanks. Many thanks. Also, Your Majesty, help me say thank you. It's not good for me to meet people in my current state. Wait for me to dress up a bit. Luonan's figure vanished with a roll of watery light as he spoke. Lian. A child that lacks love. Luonan was no longer here, but Zhang Yingying was still very cautious. She didn't say that sensitive word. Even Luonan himself might not care. This was the most basic form of respect for a friend. Then Zhang Yingying walked out of the gym. She followed the corridor outside and headed toward Her Majesty Empress Wu's study. She didn't forget to contact the person in charge of the estate in T-City on the way there. She told them about the express delivery. She tilted her head after finishing the call. There was no moon tonight. The sky above the clouds of the Pacific Ocean was dense with stars. The dusky light passed through the one-sided transparent porthole, revealing to her the abundant flow of water vapor and clouds above the ocean. She was limited by her field of vision, but only a small portion of it was visible. However, Zhang Yingying had a feeling that Luonan was here purely based on her intuition. Then she saw a cloud of mist directly in front of her line of sight. It inexplicably had a clear boundary. The mist within the mist rolled and piled up. It was as if an invisible hand was patting and patting. Soon a meaningful shape was formed. It was a smiling face shivering in the fierce winds high up in the sky. Zhang Yingying burst out in laughter. Then she stuck out her middle finger at the large face. The mist suddenly dispersed in all directions. There were no longer any traces of human activity. Her Majesty Empress Wu's airship docked with T-City's Air Traffic Control Department at around 2 o'clock in Xia City. She slowly landed in a private estate in the southern part of the city that faced the sea. The airship's engine continued to churn the air. Several well-dressed people in suits and leather shoes impatiently leaned over. They waited with their heads held high toward the newly opened cabin door. Her Majesty Empress Wu appeared at the cabin door approximately 2 minutes later. She was still wearing a long linen dress that was commonly seen in late spring and early summer. It was a perfect match for T-City's warm climate throughout the 4 seasons. She didn't wear any socks. She wore flip-flop flats as she walked down. At first glance, it looked like she had come for a summer vacation. She held a book in her hand. She flipped it open to a certain page and rolled it in her hand. Her eyelids seemed to droop, but they weren't. Her expression was leisurely and dull. She didn't feel like paying any attention to the people waiting below the ramp. It looked like she could lift the book to her eyes at any moment and enter her own world of reading. Her Majesty Empress Wu had this sort of attitude, but the people below the ramp didn't dare to treat her lightly. They all quickly came forward to welcome her. But when they actually came close, none of them dared to extend their hands. They just bowed in respect and said a few words like, "Your Majesty, it must have been hard for you to come from afar." Her Majesty Empress Wu grunted. Even the people who came forward to welcome her thought that she would directly walk over. They absolutely didn't expect that she would actually stop at the side of the ramp. "Your Majesty?" The person at the very front of the people who came to welcome her was stunned. He thought that Empress Wu had some sort of command, so he moved forward a bit. But then he saw Her Majesty Empress Wu turn her head and look up the ramp. "Hurry, hurry, hurry. The boss has already gone down." Zhang Yingying, who had already changed into casual clothes, flashed out. She strode out with her long legs and descended 4 or 5 steps down the ramp with 2 steps. Then she turned around halfway. "Hey, you weren't this slow in the past. You made the boss wait for you?" I'm coming. I wasn't like this before either." A sigh rang out. Not everyone could clearly hear what was being said, but they could confirm that it was a man. Soon, the slim figure of a young man appeared above the ramp. His attire was very ordinary. He was like a middle school student that could be seen everywhere on the streets of T-City. He didn't seem too familiar with this sort of scene. He gazed into the distance and saw the deep curtain of night in T-City. He was a bit stunned. "What time is it?" T-City time is around 2 o'clock in the morning. We're currently implementing winter time, so there's a 4-hour time difference with Xia City. "What date?" "Of course it's the 15th. Right, let me remind you. The High Seas auction is on the 16th at 8 o'clock in the evening. Geographically, it's already east of the 180th parallel, but it's a pity that it hasn't crossed the sun line. It's the same as T-City in the 12th Eastern District. Time is tight." Chapter 948. It really was urgent. Luonan retracted his gaze. Only then did he see the figure on the tarmac. He locked gazes with Her Majesty Empress Wu. He didn't see Her Majesty Empress Wu again on the way here. He couldn't help but guess. Did she have something to say? He walked down the ramp and arrived beside Her Majesty Empress Wu. Zhang Yingying didn't need to say anything. She helped introduce the important figures among the welcoming staff. "This is Boss's investment manager in T-City, Mr. Barty." The leader of the group of people who came to receive Luonan was fat and strong. The top of his head was shiny but there was no hair. However, he had a lush full beard. He was neatly groomed and his facial features were large. He wasn't handsome but he felt like a very powerful figure. Her Majesty Empress Wu pointed at this person. Find him if you have any problems in Tea City and its surroundings. I allow him to have a deficit of over 20 million every year. This is for him to be effective at times like this. Her Majesty Empress Wu didn't care about the reactions of the others. She walked forward. There was a golf cart waiting for her up ahead. Zhang Yingying thought for a bit. She winked at Luo Nan and followed Her Majesty Empress Wu down. Everyone naturally followed Her Majesty Empress Wu as soon as she left. Her Majesty Empress Wu and Zhang Yingying sat in the first car. Barty and Luo Nan fell into the second group. The car started to move forward. Barty wasn't too embarrassed. He revealed a smile to Luo Nan, revealing his snow-white teeth. The deficit is just an occasional phenomenon. I'm actually more proficient in long-term investments. In the foreseeable future, I can obtain generous returns. It is a great honor to meet you, Mr. Luo Nan. Your arrival has caused the elite traders of Tea City to be jubilant. Many people want to gamble on the confidence of the market in the next 3 days to a week. Of course, there are also some people like me. They want to gamble on the future of this city and even this world. There is no need to doubt that you are this kind of person. You give us opportunities. Luo Nan looked at him. It sounds like I'm rolling dice on the gambling table. Barty laughed heartily. With your weight, no one would be able to move you and no one would know when to stop. For people like us who are careless, we must find joy in suffering before we are crushed. So Luo Nan knew that this Mr. Barty was a very arrogant person. He displayed a bit of excessive frankness when facing a character whose strength and status were above his. In other words, he had some opinions about Luo Nan. Luo Nan had no intention of having a deep conversation with him. Just at this time, lights pierced through the darkness. Luo Nan looked against the headlights, and he could faintly see a flying car going up the winding mountain road of the estate. Meng Chong, the head of security for the Castle Financial Group, said he came under your orders. Oh, that's right. Meng Chong had already entered the range of Luo Nan's senses as they spoke. Barty said, the conditions of the manor's reception room aren't bad. There's no need. Just wait here for him. They just so happened to pass a fork in the road. Her Majesty Empress Wu's car turned toward a certain building complex above. Luo Nan let the driver stop the car at the intersection. As long as Meng Chong walked along the road, he would definitely meet him here. Barty looked at his watch. That supervisor Meng would need around 1 minute to go around this winding road. This is just the beginning. Luo Nan felt that this bald-bearded man was a bit talkative, so he didn't say anything. He just shot a glance at Barty. Barty's smile seeped out from his thick beard. Perhaps it was because of this that there seemed to be a lot more to it. From now until the start of the High Seas auction, there will be 42 hours in between. Right now, there are over 60 extraordinaries who have been confirmed to participate in the Roundtable Conference. Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but you need to do some homework in order to obtain the support of over half of them. Luo Nan still didn't speak, but his eyebrows jumped up slightly. He heard Barty say, you've been working in Tea City for many years managing this estate. Not only do you have professional service personnel, facilities and a few channels. Mr. Luo Nan, there are some people who wish to speak with you. Some people? Luo Nan looked at another fork in the road. The car carrying Her Majesty Empress Wu had already disappeared into the night. Was this Her Majesty Empress Wu's intention? Luo Nan was silent for a few seconds. The scene of his conversation with Her Majesty Empress Wu rushed through his mind like flowing water. Then he came to a conclusion. Impossible. Her Majesty Empress Wu had clearly pointed out that Luo Nan was seriously lagging behind in his studies as a sociopath. The implication was that she didn't expect Luo Nan to be of any use in this field. Luo Nan had asked Her Majesty Empress Wu for help in making up for this shortcoming. The two sides had already discussed the conditions, even if the terms were a bit cloudy and misty. Luo Nan's gaze turned to Barty, and he determined the nature of this person. This was a broker, a very powerful broker. Her Majesty Empress Wu clearly knew this. Her general meaning was that this person would be useful, but she certainly wouldn't be following this fellow's footsteps. As for how to use this person, Luo Nan thought as he slowly shook his head. I lack confidence in my eloquence. In addition, I can't arrange my time. Barty laughed very brightly. Mr. Luo Nan, the role of professionals is to help guests like you, to make more efficient use of their time and various resources. Really? Time for experiments can be divided? This is a very unique schedule. Barty was clearly stunned for a moment, but he soon revealed a smile. But there's always a way. The illumination light streaked over, sweeping across Barty's face. Luo Nan's face was probably the same. Meng Chong arrived. The golf cart stopped at a fork in the road, and someone got out from the driver's seat. It was Meng Chong. He wore a leather jacket and jeans. His appearance was neat and tidy, and the first impression he gave others was that he was swift and fierce. He was quite in line with his status as a powerful fleshly expert. Luo Nan got off the golf cart as well. He was no stranger to Meng Chong. Even though he didn't know much about Meng Chong before, he had spent half a year fiddling with the Blood Soul Temple from time to time. He had observed and even guided the daily operation of the Abyssal Region's solidified configuration. In Luo Nan's eyes, Meng Chong was like a sealed furnace. The outside was already scalding, but the inside was hiding an even more fatal heat. It was a high temperature that could melt metal. Meng Chong was a dangerous person worth paying attention to. Of course, Meng Chong's feelings were different. Meng Chong's face was expressionless right now. He bowed to Luo Nan, but he didn't say anything. He was different from Mrs. Halder and Ian Lu. This was the first time he met Luo Nan and the faintly discernible Mr. Mo. He had yet to find a suitable way to interact with them. But in the end he had to speak. After pausing for 2 seconds, he still chose to address her in the same manner as Ian Lu. Sir, the 4 base numbers for each of the 2 types are ready. Meng Chong skipped the pleasantries and went straight to the point. When he saw an outsider like Barty, he hid the word syncopator and showed his cautious and experienced side. He turned to the back of the car as he spoke. Luo Nan walked over and Barty followed behind him as if nothing had happened. Luo Nan ignored Meng Chong. Nan did not respond, nor did he say anything. He opened the trunk and there were 2 boxes side by side, one big and one small. Meng Chong opened the smaller one. Inside were 4 cylinders the size of an ordinary pen holder. 2 of them were made of wood while the other 2 were made of metal. Luo Nan didn't need to open them to look. He just needed to sweep his soul strength to know that all 4 cylinders contained centometers. It was just that the wooden cylinders were made from mutant skeletons, and the metal cylinders were made from some sort of special memory alloy. There are 200 in each cylinder. The number Meng Chong reported was quite a bit more than the base number Luo Nan needed. But this was normal. After all, there were no quality inspection standards. There was always a question of quality. Luo Nan opened one of the metal cylinders and poured out all the alloy granules within. He dangerously placed them on his palm and then he carefully closed them. He rubbed them between his palm and fingers, emitting a slight sound. In the span of a breath, these little toys the size of rice grains seemed to come alive. Their bodies swelled, transforming into an insect-like form. There were even wing-shaped flakes on their sides that vibrated. They passed through the gaps between Luo Nan's fingers and returned to the cylinder. They collided with the walls of the cylinder and made rustling sounds. This continued in succession for half a minute before they could be considered to have returned to their nest. But there was a considerable portion, around 50 or so, that simply slipped through the gaps between Luo Nan's fingers and fell all over the ground. These were the ones that Luo Nan didn't have much success with in his transformation and control. They were eliminated by Luo Nan. The margin he left behind really did show its use. Barty and Meng Chong's gazes overcame the darkness of the night to sweep a few glances over the dark ground. The only difference was that Barty didn't make any follow-up movements. Meng Chong immediately bent down and picked up a few of the granules from the ground. He placed them in his palm, took a photo, and prepared to send it back to the processing plant for future reference and improvement. Luo Nan ignored the actions of the 2. He picked up another cylinder and did the same thing. He tested every cylinder and eliminated 50 to 60 granules from each cylinder. One of the cylinders didn't even have enough bone materials to form a base number. The quality of quality wasn't ideal. Compared to the Martial Emperor Sakamoto, which was still embedded in the vapor clone, the difference was quite obvious. Meng Chong could only admit his mistake when he saw this. "Sir, I'm sorry." "It's nothing. It's to be expected." The difference between Earth's materials and the Heavenly Yuan Empires was obvious. Plus, the standard version of the Heavenly Yuan Empire had a built-in microchip for every syncopator. It could be adjusted intelligently, reducing the burden of control by quite a bit. Luo Nan didn't have this condition on Earth. There were bound to be many redundant operations that exceeded the standards of the drill manual. The difficulty increased, and the requirements for the syncopator's strength and sensitivity increased. With so many restrictions, it was fine as long as it could be used. Even Her Majesty Martial Emperor's refined version had the problem of relative fragility. Luo Nan was quite open-minded. He tidied up the syncopator and turned his gaze to the large box to the side. He was a bit uncertain. This is... Deputy Ablatum Een once requested the order to collect information and resources related to the Deep Blue Walkers. Meng Chong opened the large box, revealing the silver-white components inside. This is a military experimental machine. According to the military, it's between version 3 and 4. It was transferred through internal connections and went through the proper procedures. Currently, it's attached to the security department of the Castle Financial Group. It can connect to the private network, but there's a limit to its access. We thought that you might be able to use it in the near future, so we brought it over. Chapter 949. Ah, thank you. Luonan did not instruct Yinlu to do this. It was completely her autonomous judgment. It was quite on point. Though Luonan's water vapor avatar was no longer needed, the complicated situation that followed was that Luonan's main body could come over at any time. It was always good to have more resources to support him. Oh, you don't need it now? Not necessarily. Luonan extended his hand and streaked across the ice-cold metal component. There was a clear difference between the perceptual levels of his water vapor avatar and his fleshly body. This gave him a different kind of feeling, so much so that he had some inspiration in his mind. He fell silent. He placed his fingertips on the component and gently stroked it. After a while, his gaze shifted to Meng Chong. The latter maintained a respectful and somewhat distant posture as he continued. Also, Deputy Ritual Master Een has also sent over the design of the 4th version of the exoskeleton frame. It is currently being pushed forward, and the assembly experiment will be conducted before 8 in the morning. Sir, you can come to the processing plant for on-site guidance. Excellent. Luonan's words were a bit casual. The exoskeleton frame was also used to build a perfect body for his main body, so it wasn't used for the time being. It could only be said that Yinlu had indeed thought things through and made preparations. But right now, Luonan's train of thought had already slanted in another direction. He asked Meng Chong, "The beach where Lady Halder usually trains?" Meng Chong displayed clear astonishment. Clearly, he didn't understand how Luonan, who had just arrived in T-City, could understand Mrs. Halder's daily routine so well. But he still responded quickly. "That's an unnamed private beach. We call it Zeolite. It's less than 20 kilometers away from here." Ancient Castle Financial Group's Aber Manor? Barty suddenly interrupted. "If the weather is clear from the highest castle here, which is where Her Majesty Empress Wu is currently staying, you can actually see the cliff of the orchard where your manor is located from a distance. The Zeolite beach should be on the other side of the cliff. We can already be considered neighbors." Meng Chong glanced at him but did not reply. Luonan's interest was piqued. "Really? You really had to go and take a look. How about this? Tell Her Majesty Empress Wu that I'm going to Aber's Manor to conduct an experiment. If there's anything, she can contact me at any time." When Barty heard the word experiment again, he needed another 2 seconds to digest it. Just as he was thinking, Luo Binghe suddenly realized something. Nan had already turned to the side of the car. She pulled open the door of Meng Chong's car and sat down without hesitation. Meng Chong was also stunned. As the head of security for many years, he naturally knew what to do next. However, his meticulous thinking made him hesitate. Chapter 950. Early in the morning, the wind blowing from inland in D-City brought the chill of late autumn. However, due to the heat island effect, the wind lost its power when it entered the inner city. Barty's stout body was spread out, occupying nearly 1/3 of the interior space of the luxury commercial vehicle. He unbuttoned his suit and let his chest and abdomen vibrate to their heart's content under unrestrained conditions, emitting an abundant resonance sound. It was an hour's drive from the manor at the edge of the city to the heart of the city, and the phone call was almost non-stop. Even Barty he purposely compressed every communication to 5 minutes, but there was still very little free time. And in almost every communication, the key content of the conversation could not be separated from 2 points: Luonan and the little plaything that Luonan released. As the most authoritative source of information in T-City, the news that Barty released successfully caused a series of echoes. This was the embodiment of his value. Of course, this meant that Luonan was still the hot topic of the entire circle from a deeper level of significance. Various parties expressed their attitudes towards him and the information they sent out. They would all have rather sensitive and extreme reactions. "He's rolling around in the oil pan. Be careful not to get oil on him." In the most recent call, The tone of the other side was like freshly squeezed lemon juice or some kind of ancient Eastern seasoning. Unfortunately, I'm not used to Chinese cuisine, let alone a chef. That's right, but you're an ingredient supplier, the kind that hoards for profit. I can take it as a compliment. We're almost there, just a moment. As they spoke, the car stopped in front of a gate formed by a group of low-rise buildings. After a simple identity verification, the gate opened, and the car continued to move forward. Barty's identification bracelet automatically connected to the factory's built-in artificial intelligence. Bitter Reef sends its love, Mr. Barty. You have an appointment from Mr. Yen Yonghua of the Apocalypse Laboratory. He has arrived early. Oh, I see. The car drove directly into the underground laboratory area. The administrative head of the laboratory, Morrison, was already waiting at the entrance. He put on a warm smile to greet his big benefactor. Mr. Barty, welcome to the laboratory. Barty reached out and shook Morrison's hand. I hope there are valuable results waiting for me. The laboratory has made some preliminary conclusions. Judgment. Although Barty was plump, he walked like the wind. In just a few steps, he had left Morrison in the dust, forcing the middle-aged successful man in a white coat to jog to catch up. However, Barty could no longer be bothered with him. He passed through a few security checkpoints with ease, and soon arrived at the core area of the Bitter Reef Laboratory. Barty entered the observation room, and Yen Yonghua was already waiting there. This important member of the Apocalypse Lab, who could still be considered young, was currently circulating his supernatural powers. As a result, his pupils were red, and the veins around his eyes, especially around his temples, bulged like a dense web. They were also clearly twitching, and it was a daunting sight. The look in his eyes was fierce and cold. As a result, Morrison hesitated outside the observation room and didn't dare to enter. Barty did not mind. He walked up and greeted Yen Yonghua by his secular name. I'm sorry, there was a traffic jam on the road. Lately, T-City has been bustling with activity again. Director Yen, are you satisfied with the laboratory environment? If we exclude the human factor, it's okay. Barty laughed heartily and then said, the professionals you brought can fill in the gaps. Everyone in the relevant field is a self-righteous blind person, except for Instructor Li Wei. Barty did not refute this argument. He just asked, then what about Luo Nan? Yen Yonghua did not answer this question. He just shot a cold glance at Barty before turning his head to watch the progress of the experiment. Barty knew himself very well. He was not a self-righteous person, but he was certainly a blind person in the relevant field. Therefore, he just observed and listened to the temporary conclusions of those who dared to speak. Even so, debate was unavoidable. Omitting and replacing the professional terms, the meaning was, professional A. The structure is simple. It doesn't possess any direct lethality. The design is homogeneous, and the composition of the entity is very poor. But in the mental field, especially the configuration field that he has been advocating, it should be possible to construct a relatively rich virtual component. Therefore, this is a type of material component. Professional B. No, this should be some kind of distributed architecture. It is very suitable for the implantation of elementary intelligence. If the underlying links are strengthened, a simple command can form a large number of varied forms. From this point of view, it is more like some kind of mimetic ecological model. It is the embodiment of bionic intelligence technology. Where's the intelligence? Where's the chip? In your fantasies? There's clearly a space reserved. Did you guys feed the results of your structural disassembly and restoration to the dogs? Professional C tried to smooth things over. It's completely possible to have both. Through bionic technology, a certain structure can be realized and then soul strength can be used to control it. Shut up, loser who failed the experiment. Everyone in the observation room, aside from Barty, had ugly expressions on their faces as they watched the professionals in the laboratory bicker. Morrison, in particular, was already considering leaving the room. It was at this time that Barty asked him, Dr. Morrison, you're also a professional. What's your opinion? I'm just the person in charge of the administration. Morrison wailed in his heart. But no matter what, he was still a former expert in the study of mutant species. Even though he had retired from the front lines for many years, he still had the basics. Perhaps it's because of the influence of my professional direction. Of course, it's also because of your description of the situation, Mr. Barty. I'm more inclined towards BS opinion. In fact, the laboratory has already searched for social species as a control group. Bees and ants are all possibilities. In the mutant species, Barty asked before Morrison could finish speaking, what can Luo Nan do with it? What can we do with it? Can we find a docking point? Morrison was really sweating. It was not impossible for him to forcefully explain and speculate, but at this extremely pragmatic level, he had to take responsibility for every word he said. Sweat dripped down from his forehead, and he subconsciously grabbed the handkerchief in his pocket. He wanted to take it out to wipe his sweat, but he knew that it was inappropriate. He froze there for a time, feeling extremely awkward. Barty didn't waste any time on this person. He turned to Yin Yonghua and said, "There must be a purpose for him to find an unreliable supervisor like me and let the news out. Clearly, if you want to talk to him, you need to understand the value of this. You need to be willing to bite the bait. There should be a certain threshold, but it shouldn't be impossible for everyone to understand." "What are you trying to say?" Yin Yonghua's eyebrows were wrinkled to the point of his temples. He really didn't like being tested by others, especially by Luo Nan. Barty's smile was still extremely obvious under his thick beard. "This is a screening question. Luo Nan, or perhaps the people behind him, are currently screening allies. In matters related to the development of a new plane, they are continuously leaking information for this. I understand it like this. Mr. Mo revealed the mushed-mouth ape to solve the problem of having and not having. Luo Nan took out this little thing to show that he has something. Or perhaps it could be said that he is willing to take it out and share it. From the looks of it, they're still reserved, but it's a qualified negotiating attitude." "Negotiating?" The corner of Yin Yonghua's mouth twitched. "Follow his pace. The fish will eat whatever he takes?" Barty indicated for him to calm down. "I know that you guys are impatient. Back then you wanted to eat Luo Yuandao clean in one bite. But in the end you guys might have missed out on the most valuable part. Now you're using the same method on his grandson? But this isn't the wilderness era. Luo Nan isn't that crazy old man. He has the qualifications to negotiate." "I believe so." Yin Yonghua was silent. Chapter 951. Luo Nan was helpless. "I said. If you don't peek at me, how would you know that I'm peeking? Cough, remotely observing you." Zhang Yingying didn't wait for Luo Nan to enter the loop. She spat out a long string of words. "You've been spending a lot of time on your water vapor clone lately. Now you can feel the power of the boss's condensation ring, right? You're thinking about that fortress in the clouds, huh? Hold on, where did you call me from? Xia City? A fortress?" Luo Nan was stunned on Zeolite Beach. Something happened to the fortress of the Bloodwill Ring in Xia City? LLW, at winky face after the awkwardness caused by their lack of understanding, Luo Nan was the first to respond. The fortress that Zhang Yingying was referring to should be a structure that he, the Pope, and the True God had temporarily constructed near the intercontinental airship when they fought across space. He had pretty much forgotten about it. The fortress of the Bloodwill Ring in Xia City had a simple wedge-shaped structure that was pieced together to solidify the abyssal region configuration. It had more value for in-depth research. Luo Nan was able to make a basic judgment after returning from the relay station. The fortress of the Bloodwill Ring was definitely not a design of the era he had entered. Either this was the classical mental configuration of the Heaven Abyss civilization before the Calamity World, or it was created in a region outside of the light concealment system after that. This involved the background of life and death, sin poison. But from the perspective of others, Luo Nan was able to contend against the two extraordinaries of the Amaterasu order. He must have used some sort of incredible secret technique. Zhang Yingying was probably thinking more about it because she was mixed in with the condensation ring and the water vapor clone. Luo Nan answered honestly, "What's going on right now is much more complicated than the fortress in the clouds. So I suggest that you look less in this direction to avoid getting hurt." "Oh my. The ultimate meaning of the forbidden technique. That's still far from it. My brain capacity is reaching its limit, but the resources I can mobilize are also at their limit." Luo Nan sighed as he spoke. Part of the reason he was chatting with Zhang Yingying right now was that his mental strength had reached its limit. He needed to adjust it. Zhang Yingying was very concerned. She asked him, "Did you run into trouble with your research? Is it critical? Should I ask the boss for help? The amount of resources that T-City can mobilize is quite considerable." "Resources? Barty's resources?" Zhang Yingying laughed. "That Barty guy definitely doesn't get along with you, but he's really useful. You should know that he's a rare middle-aged talent in the LCRF. LCRF? Isn't he a subordinate of the martial monarch? Boss also has a large investment in LCRF. What's wrong with using them as a manager?" "Oh, I remember telling you about this. Yeah, that's right. It's nothing much. This was the reality of contemporary society. Under the broken political map of substantive urban autonomy, only the power of capital could infiltrate every corner in various forms and affect every aspect of society invisibly. Policies, laws, and mainstream public consciousness all served it, were interfered with, and were bound to coexist with it. The extraordinary power of the inner world did have the ability to break this situation, but a considerable number of people, including heroes like Her Majesty Empress Wu, seemed to prefer to use this situation rather than break it. Luonan didn't have a particularly clear inclination in his thinking. It was just that he lacked a favorable impression of Quantum Corporation, a large capital spokesperson, due to the influence of his life experience. He didn't go so far as to have any opinions about Her Majesty Empress Wu's investment model. The reason why he was a bit absent-minded was because of the influence of his current research topic. Zhang Yingying didn't delve too deeply into it. She just continued to introduce Barty's situation. However, you need to pay attention. Barty is a rather famous stubborn person in the LCRF. Do you understand what a stubborn person means? I think I do. It was said that the big shots of the Life Cycle Research Fund were mostly people with severe jealousy. They weren't able to catch the tide of the age of distortion due to various reasons. They had no fate with extraordinary powers. Although they grasped an enormous amount of resources on Earth, their aged and frail bodies weren't enough to support their ambitions and desires. Therefore, they spent large sums of money on life extension, human body modification, artificially constructed extraordinary powers, and other fields. They did this all for the sake of using money to bridge the chasm of life levels and obtain exuberant life force that matched their social status. But their progress in this aspect was still limited so far. The results of the burners and the like clearly couldn't be used on these old and decrepit people. As time passed, the minds of these people inevitably became anxious and warped. One could well imagine how some of these extreme people viewed ability users. However, Barty, he's still in the prime of his life. He's in the late stages of pancreatic cancer. He's like an ordinary person right now because boss intervened and slowed down the course of the disease. Luonan drew a cold breath. Is this the omnipotent? Zhang Yingying shrugged. No matter what, he picked up a life from boss. Yes, half a life. But his mentality is already different from ordinary people. He's jealous, anxious, thirsty. Boss said that he can disregard everything for the sake of prolonging his life. His will is firm and he possesses extraordinary forbearance. Luonan recalled the short time they spent together last night and expressed his approval. Amazing. I couldn't tell at all. This kind of person is quite scary. But the treatment of his disease largely relies on boss. So he can be considered reliable on a certain level. This isn't my area of expertise. So if you guys say he's reliable, then he's reliable. Luonan decided not to waste his brain on this matter. In any case, his request to Zhang Yingying was just to be a loudspeaker. She had already done it. Zhang Yingying understood. She no longer talked about this topic with Luonan. All right. I did as you requested. I sent the Syncopators' blueprints back to Xia City. I heard you say that this thing can be used on the Blood Intent Ring's fortress? When did I say that? Oh, it's not impossible. There are some similarities in theory. Zhang Yingying subconsciously shivered when she heard the hidden meaning in Luonan's words. Wait a minute. It was too late. A large number of characters, symbols, and diagrams flashed before Luonan's eyes. These came from the external neurons database. To be more precise, they came from the data of germination in the inner universe simulator. To be more precise, they came from the fantasy mimicry technique that Lieutenant Go Yi had imparted to him. It was the research and application of the classical fantasy school of the Heavenly Yuan Empire. After Luonan returned, he did a rough study. Last night, he did an intensive reading and verification. He had some insights that he needed to share with someone. Zhang Yingying came just in time. Therefore, Luonan intentionally or unintentionally skipped over the previous sentence. He opened up the sharing of his academic insights. The syncopator is essentially a kind of bionic mimicry structure. This bionic design relies on a theoretical platform. We can call it the superconfiguration theory. It's not that profound to put it bluntly. If we roughly interpret it, the research direction is a bit like our system theory. It's the old 3 theories and the new 3 theories of the last century. Our? Zhang Yingying, who was unfortunately trapped in a pit, keenly sensed a seemingly superfluous word. In any case, self-organization, synergy, mutation, hierarchical structure, and so on are all part of it. Luonan just pretended not to hear her. He continued to speak. This theory believes that the universal system of the universe exists in a hidden nature of matter. It can only emerge in a specific system environment. From a simple utilitarian point of view, it's the greater part of the whole greater than the sum of its parts. It's the reflection of the ultimate law that makes a system a system. It can be called the superconfiguration. From a realistic point of view, the superconfiguration itself is an eternal goal of exploration. Perhaps there will never be a correct answer. But through imitation and analysis, this ultimate superconfiguration can be reduced and degraded into a kind of fantasy configuration that can be utilized. This fantasy configuration can be used to guide all things to form a specific system. It is a channel that realizes a two-way interference between the mind and matter. Luonan did not explain one point. This so-called fantasy configuration, which was degraded from the so-called superconfiguration, was one of the origins of the school of fantasy in the Heaven Abyss civilization. There was another point that needed to be made clear. The theory of superconfiguration was a large volume in the Heaven Abyss civilization. It was even the king's theory, for a long period of time. The research of the school of fantasy was basically covered by this set of theories. This included the school of creation that Luonan knew of. Seemed to be the same. He continued to speak. The syncopator mainly emphasizes three key words on the superconfiguration theory platform. First, hierarchy. Second, structure. Third, leap. As long as one understands a bit of system theory, understanding this shouldn't be difficult. I'll just talk about the concrete division of levels. Fuck you, it's not difficult. Zhang Yingying cursed. But Luonan's clumsy expression skills aside, the contents of what he said were in line with Zhang Yingying's basic knowledge. The depth was moderate. Luonan spoke again. The division mode is still that obsessive-compulsive disorder of 3 stages. What do you mean by still? Luonan did not pause. He continued to speak. The first level is the material level. In other words, the primordial object universe is completely devoid of life and consciousness. It is the bottom and foundation of everything. The second level is the life level. The universe has gone through hundreds of millions and billions of years of evolution. It has formed life substrates, structures, functions, and even instincts, desires, social groups, low and high-level mental modes. Of course, this includes the actual universe that has been influenced and transformed. This is the main and central axis of research. The third level is the fantasy level. It is the advanced derivative and fantasy creation of life and consciousness. In a narrow sense, it is the existence mode and level of supernatural power that can effectively interfere with the actual universe. A bit higher also includes the evolution of the universe after the supernatural interference. This is the direction and goal of research. The 3 levels, from low to high, from disorder to order, from primordial to future, go through a super complex arrangement and combination. This includes the vertical and horizontal arrangement of space and time, as well as the natural and unnatural process of leap in importance. Looking at the big picture, the syncopator is the logical mapping of this sort of hierarchical arrangement and leap. Chapter 952. Luonan quickly responded, "There's no need to remember. This sort of simple theory and hierarchical division is just a basic representation. It's not something important. What's important is the logical reasoning and precise model established upon it. Of course, there's also the corresponding accumulation of technology. Well, this is all the more reason to record. Your words will make a lot of people drool." Zhang Yingying had started recording 10 seconds ago. She was also a bit unwilling to give up. She adjusted the parameters of the telescope, hoping to make a more detailed distinction of the mist on the distant shoreline. However, she obtained nothing even when the atmosphere boiled and fluctuated back and forth. "I told you not to look. I'm very sensitive right now." Luonan was a bit helpless, but he soon returned to the main topic. "Aren't you being too blunt?" No. This is for the best. You must know that it's not just the technical personnel who are listening to your words. A bunch of politicians are listening as well. It's impossible to overestimate their stupidity at this time. Okay, then let's return to the fortress of the Ring of Blood Intent. Oh, have you finished debugging the sensor detection module? Luonan vaguely remembered that 2 days ago, before he went looking for Her Majesty Empress Wu, he had entered his friend group to ask about it. Someone had mentioned this matter at the time, saying that there was a bug. If it wasn't paper cut, then it was Gao Tianshi. Hee, Mr. CDO. Do you have the nerve to ask this question? Zhang Yingying sneered twice. Then she suddenly asked, "Oh right, what's the project you're working on?" Isn't it the fortress of the Ring of Blood Intent? Scavenger. Scavenger. Is that so? Luonan had to admit that he was a bit unfamiliar with the fortress of the Ring of Blood Intent, let alone the Scavenger project. He had been plotting to kill Gong Chi for the past few months, but most of his energy was tied up in Ban City. He had nearly forgotten that he was the CTO of Xia City's Scavenger project. With great difficulty, the memory fragments that had settled down stirred up once more. The Scavenger project was a joint research and development project launched by the Xia City branch, the Xia City government, the garrison, and the Eastern Sea War Zone. Nominally, it was to cleanse and purify illegal configurations on the mental plane and to lower the rate of supernatural murders. In reality, it was a platform for several partners to research, analyze, and absorb the technology of the Ring of Blood Intent. As for the Blood Intent Ring Fortress, it was an additional product that Luonan used to demonstrate configuration theory during his first public lecture. Through its unique basic modules and circulation structure, it gathered, organized, and connected the energy information of thousands of ability users, forming an energy structure system anchored on the spiritual plane, pointing directly at the Abyss region. Back then, there were quite a number of people who didn't possess enough extraordinary power to construct a module on the mental plane. They had no choice but to borrow the psychic wave network of Xia City to simulate and relay the operation. During the process, the module structure was named the Ring of Blood Will by the administrator of the psychic wave network. In fact, this system was known as a fortress in the external neurons database. Therefore, Luonan combined the two and called it the Ring of Blood Intent Fortress. Speaking of which, the Blood Intent Ring Fortress was the first time Luonan had publicly displayed and disseminated the technological achievements of the Heaven Abyss civilization. The results were astonishing. Not only did he verify the cage state of the mental soul, he overturned the traditional model of the Sea of Consciousness with 3 layers, 1 region, and 1 domain in one fell swoop. He also tore apart the gorgeous outer garments of the profound mysteries of the Abyss region, the solidified configuration of the Abyss region, and revealed it to the world. Quite a few people were left in quite a sorry state. Most of Luonan's enormous reputation in the inner world came from this. Because of this, Zhang Yingying felt that Luonan's reaction was more and more absurd. But she was already used to it. Okay. Even though I'm not part of the Scavenger project team, I can still answer Mr. CTO's question. The current situation isn't bad. It's too bad. You set a direction and then don't care about it. Then you added a tattered external patch and used it to create some detection and sensing module. That toy is just a half-finished product. Countless follow-up plans have been set, and bugs are emerging endlessly. If you use this toy to be a scavenger, you'll only be swept away. I feel like the government and the military are losing confidence. Luonan was a bit shocked. Are they that passive? Oh, actually it's not that bad. Zhang Yingying suddenly recalled that Luonan had a pile of troublesome matters tangled up on his body. It could be said that Luonan had too much time to take care of himself. He certainly did not have the energy to divert his attention to other things. She rushed to make up for it. As long as the fortress of the Blood Intent Ring hangs in the Abyss region, it can be used as a stargazing platform and a training room. Those fellows will have to endure no matter what. Luonan laughed. They can endure today, but they might not be able to endure tomorrow. Zhang Yingying was dumbfounded. Luonan's words couldn't even be considered a metaphor. They were facts placed before her eyes. It was 8 o'clock in the morning on the 15th. The amount of information he grasped and the depth of the level could no longer be mentioned in the same breath as before. Just as he was able to guess the era imprint of the fortress's structure, he was also able to grasp the difference in the school of thought behind its design. From his perspective, the design of the Blood Intent Ring Fortress was more like a branch of the school of creation. It was the famous school of the Heavenly Yuan Empire in his dream. Liang Lu, Officer Go Yi, and Master Xingzhan were all from this school. Its characteristics were strict and precise. It was highly generalized and coordinated. No matter how chaotic the beginning was, it would eventually form a strict system after a few rounds of adjustments. Moreover, it was most suitable for seamlessly merging with man-made objects. It possessed a high degree of compatibility and adaptability. The Ring of Blood Will was an obvious example. From the scattered and volatile energy and information of a group of ability users to solidify into a special wedge-shaped structure, and then layer upon layer to form a fortress, it perfectly embodied the structure and logic of creation of this line. However, this branch had extremely high requirements for basic thinking, especially configuration thinking. Only Luonan was able to lay down a solid foundation in the mist labyrinth, a unique environment unimaginable to ordinary people. Only then was he able to be like a fish in water in the relay station environment. The majority of ability users on Earth, including those in Xia City, might not even be able to understand the concept of configuration. It was truly difficult for them to cheat and think about improvements within such a strict system. In comparison, the School of Fantasy seemed to be a bit livelier. At least in terms of the use of the syncopator. Didn't we send them the design of the syncopator? Let's start from there. Since it's called syncopator, they have to cut it and separate it. Only then can it be considered as working. You can take note of this. Oh. Zhang Yingying reacted. She suppressed her worries for now and raised her voice. Tell me, how do you want them to cut it? In essence, the fortress is a system structure that is simply piled up. Every participant adds bricks and tiles to it. They use everyone's soul strength to construct the blood intent ring. It is a subsystem of the larger system. Through the interaction with other similar subsystems, the main function of the fortress is constructed. Of course, they have already been given a few rules in the initial design. That is why they are called the fortress and not anything else. What they need to do right now is to first put effort into their blood intent ring. Yes, I know they have been researching it, but their research tools are inadequate. Whether it is the bracelets or the external talismans, they all lack the ability to instantly adjust and switch. It will be different if they switch to the syncopator. It seems very empty. Are you sure this isn't a shopping advertisement on a radio station? Ah, I understand. Zhang Yingying was enlightened. Although she was still a bit doubtful about the practical effects, she quickly firmed her stance. She displayed 120% of her acting skills. She pinched an extremely pleasantly surprised tone and strove to play the role of a supporting character. Can the syncopator be used to replace the blood intent ring bracelets? Speaking of which, that stupid big black and thick thing gets into trouble every 2 or 3 days. And then there are the talismans and stickers. Even Gao Tianxia himself deeply hates them. Of course it can be used. It's just that the requirements to use it are quite high. It's not too friendly to the fleshly side. Oh, the built-in chip can be broken. Once you grasp the basic mode, and the corresponding software layer can automatically correct and tidy things up. It shouldn't be a problem. Luonan was referring to the situation in the Heavenly Yuan Empire. Based on his experience in the relay station, a well-trained maintainer could basically use a syncopator with a certain number of units at ease. It was true that there was the support of the Jade Crystal Array, but there was no need to use it in the complicated situation of resisting the evil poison. As for the corresponding chip, software layer, algorithms, and the like, weren't there a large number of professionals? The Xia City branch, the Xia City government, the military? It would be a waste not to use these resources. Next, Luonan gave Zhang Yingying a few basic techniques for operating the syncopator, as well as a few things to take note of when using it to replace the blood intent ring bracelets. Well, time was tight, so it was inevitable that the writing was sloppy. In any case, it was impossible for Luonan to waste too much energy on this. He spent about half the time he spent chatting and drafted the text and design sketches. He tossed them to Zhang Yingying and ignored the matter on the other side. The minute disturbances brought about by the telescope disappeared, and Luonan returned to the tranquil and peaceful environment of his research. He let out a long breath, and his gaze swept over the situation around him. The surface of the sea, which should have been the vastest, was currently filled with mist. It obscured his line of sight, but most of it stopped at the edge of the beach. Only a few wisps of smoke overflowed, following the slapping of the fine waves against the shore. Occasionally, the smoke would advance a few steps before quickly reversing back. On the beach, there were all sorts of machinery and junk scattered about. The largest one was obviously the flying car that Meng Chong had driven over. Not far away there were places for the syncopator and the deep blue walker. Chapter 953. Luonan had spent quite a bit of effort on Meng Chong in order to make the prop better and to better approach the design situation. He had also given Meng Chong tangible benefits. Then you can experience it again. Remember, you are a big, irascible fellow right now. Irascible, extremely irascible. Your instinct is to recklessly destroy everything. All living things are your fuel. This isn't some high-level thinking or world-destroying plan. This is a low-level instinct. It is a need for survival. This is the basic requirement for your survival. It is a unique driving force established on a specific physiological basis. It is like the food of animals, the photosynthesis of plants. Luonan was undoubtedly describing the Hellfire Tyrant right now. It was the great sovereign-level foreign species that had appeared in his dream and nearly pierced through the relay station. As for why he had to do this, it was naturally to restore the battlefield of the relay station. Of course, Luonan didn't want to completely restore the scene. Instead, he wanted to reverse infer the basic environment of Vanguard Planet 4 from the changes in the dynamic resisting impact. This was the only valuable frame of reference that Luonan could find. Everything was done to deal with the greed of humans that was vaster than the Pacific Ocean. In order to restore the scene, Luonan seriously combed through his memories. He roughly classified all the elements in his memories into 5 parts. The first part was naturally the Heaven Abyss system represented by the relay station's defense forces, various facilities, and even the spacetime fortress structure. The seemingly random flying cars, junk, and sand piles on the beach were in fact a sand table reconstruction based on the internal and external layout of the relay station. The deep blue walker at the forefront of the beach represented the highest combat power of the front lines at the time. It was Sir Xuanhuan who had gathered the power of the Standard Array and other systems, and Lieutenant Lu Andy who had replaced him. The second part was the largest opposition of the relay station. It was the great sovereign-level magnetic cloud jellyfish with its own massive servant army. Right now, it was represented by the surging thick fog on the surface of the sea and the waves that pushed against the shore. The foggy seawater seemed chaotic, but there were complex configurations flowing and changing inside. They were constantly combining and decomposing, carrying out rational attempts at a hierarchical structure. As a result, they were quite sensitive to external stimuli. Luonan wasn't joking around with Zhang Yingying. What he said was completely true. The third part was the Hellfire Tyrant that Luonan requested Meng Chong to play. Although that fellow was summoned by the magnetic mica jellyfish, it had a relatively independent characteristic. Moreover, it was able to support a tripartite situation at the time, affecting the entire battle situation at the front lines, so it was singled out. The fourth part was already no longer a material existence, but rather a fatal environment that couldn't be ignored in the greater context of the light concealment galaxy evil poison contamination. Be it the elite troops of the Heavenly Yuan Empire or the fantasy breeds and extraterrestrial species at the Great Monarch level, they were all affected by this environment. The fifth part was the final goal that Luonan pursued. It was the framework and specific parameters of the spacetime environment that bore all of this. Luonan obtained inspiration from the fantasy mimicry technique and the super configuration theory by using this sand table style of structural restoration and contrasting deduction. At the same time, it was also an experimental requirement that he could not bypass. As he digested and absorbed the fantasy mimicry technology and the theoretical basis, he tore it apart and crumbled it. In a way that the inner world on Earth could understand, he gave Meng Chong immediate guidance. You have to be confident. This big guy I'm describing and the divine powers it's displaying are very similar to the supernatural powers of your order. In other words, it's very likely that a certain similarity exists on the lower level of the structure. Therefore, I don't want you to imagine, guess, or imitate. Instead, I want you to calm your mind and use the method I'll teach you. Patiently and meticulously divide it down. Find the lower level structure of the blood flame order's blood and fire powers and then adjust it. You'll get twice the result with half the effort. As Luonan spoke, several dozen centimeters shuttled and crisscrossed around Meng Chong's body. They flew up and down, helping Meng Chong experience this feeling. Meng Chong's brows were locked tight. His face was taut, and a bloody light flowed within his eye sockets. It seemed to be so dense that it could explode at any moment. But in the end, the burning sensation of hunger and thirst still only appeared in his imagination. Whoosh! A long sound similar to the sound of evaporation rang out, and Luonan immediately called for a stop. Slow down for a bit. The corner of your eye is cracking. Only now did Meng Chong feel that the corner of his eye and the side of his cheek were a bit strange. It was probably because of the cracked corner of his eye. Blood flowed down, but it was soon evaporated by the high temperature of the bloody flames. Meng Chong didn't care about such a small injury at all. He took a deep breath. Again. Luonan shook his head. I still need to slow down. I need to manifest the structure, the level, and the element of a leap. This isn't something that can be accomplished just by relying on the bravery of blood. Luonan put away the centimeters as he spoke. Meng Chong's thoughts weren't too clear to begin with, and they instantly became much more chaotic. He really couldn't hold on any longer. Meng Chong closed his eyes and slowly let out a long breath. The taste of blood clearly stuck to his lips, teeth, and throat. He was injured and it wasn't light. This was the price of helping Luonan with his experiments. It wasn't that Meng Chong didn't have his suspicions, but now that he closed his eyes, the vivid imprints that were branded into his memories naturally emerged. These were the few fragments that Luonan had displayed before Meng Chong's eyes when he had helped Luonan with his experiments. They seemed to have been dyed in color right now. They were a field of blood red. Of course, the most important thing was the structure and even the image that transcended above it. Even though it was intermittent, it possessed a stifling guiding force, an extremely high degree of compatibility, and an inconceivable sense of intimacy. Every time Meng Chong retraced, the blood and energy in his entire body would boil. It was as if he wanted to exhaust all of his energy to mend the incomplete parts, to make a complete appearance. But in the end he still wasn't able to touch that level. Even though he disregarded everything and forcefully catalyzed his blood and energy to the point of accumulating internal injuries, there was still an insurmountable distance between him and the level of those few configuration fragments. But no matter what, Meng Chong was a veteran cultivator of the Blood Flame Order. He could affirm that any cultivator of the Blood Flame Order who saw these configuration fragments would have doubts, but they would have to be prepared to become a joke. Even though these fragments didn't represent the inevitability of the development of the Blood Flame Order's system, they already possessed the function of road markers. They clearly marked a path forward. On this level, truth and falsehood had already lost their meaning. If Luonan was able to tamper with this matter to this degree, then the Blood Flame Order deserved to be squeezed and toyed with like cattle and horses. Meng Chong suddenly came to a realization. His eyelids trembled a few times and he opened his eyes once more. His gaze cast toward Luonan, and he saw that Luonan was controlling over 100 syncopators. Luonan was moving shadows around his house. Luonan was focused like a child addicted to a game. In reality, Luonan was only 16 years old. Meng Chong felt that this was rather absurd, but these thoughts were washed clean in the blink of an eye. He hesitated for a second, but he still opened his mouth and said, "Sir, I really don't have the strength to handle this matter alone. Is it possible to brainstorm in the order?" The flying ant beside Luonan buzzed. Luonan's eyes didn't even glance over, but his voice was very clear. "Sure." Chapter 954. Many thanks, sir. Meng Chong felt that it was a bit odd the moment the words left his mouth. But after careful consideration he felt that there was nothing wrong with it. Luonan finally turned around and looked at Meng Chong. His lips hooked. "No need to thank me. These weren't some polite words." Luonan agreed to this matter completely out of practical necessity. As mentioned before, the simple model on Zeolite Beach consisted of 5 parts according to Luonan's design classification. The space-time structure that bore the elements of the first 4 parts needed to be deduced and calculated in the end. Only then would there be results. Sin poison was a complete disorder and distortion on the level of the rules. According to the theory of superconfiguration, this toy could be said to be the result of messing up the superconfiguration of the cosmic system. Luonan relied on his own experience and feelings to attempt some post-processing. He did a bit of simulation, but it was all virtual right now. He couldn't think too much about it. What he really needed to simulate were the relay station, the magneto-optical mica, and the Hellfire Tyrant. The more ethereal these 2 elements were, the more important these 3 elements were. Therefore, Meng Chong's role as the Hellfire Tyrant was indispensable in Luonan's model design. The current Luonan was a bit like a core enterprise in the supply chain. He wanted to produce a final product, but there were a few problems with the supply of certain materials. He was choked by the neck. It wouldn't be a problem for him to spend a huge sum of money to help the upstream suppliers upgrade. But now, Meng Chong took the initiative to express his intentions to mobilize resources to solve the problem. He wouldn't take advantage of Meng Chong. It could be considered a win-win situation. Luonan didn't have the time to care too much. No matter how important Meng Chong's role was, it was just a corner. Luonan was much more tired than Meng Chong in terms of model requirements. The Heaven Abyss system of the relay station and the magneto-optical mica required him to sketch, fill, adjust, and perfect them. Luonan was currently mainly restoring the Heaven Abyss system. From the course of promotion to field officer, it could be confirmed that after the era of Sin, the Heavenly Yuan Empire had built all of its large ships and infrastructure around the Jade Crystal Array in order to fight against the evil poison. There had never been an exception. Even the entire civilization in the light concealment system was built upon the Jade Crystal Plane that monarch xuanhuan had transformed into. Luonan didn't feel that he had the ability to reproduce the jade crystal array. He just knew the smell. Then he strove to make all of his external activities manifest it. In comparison, there was another aspect of the heavenly abyss system, which was possibly even more ancient than the jade crystal array, and had an even purer quality, which was the standard battle array. Together with the jade crystal array, they were like the wheels of a chariot or the wings of a bird. They supported the heavenly Yuan Empire's most basic form of warfare. Luonan was much more proficient in the domain of standardized arrays. Though the formatted space of Earth's deep blue platform was an inferior version of this kind of collective configuration, it still gave him enough experience to accumulate. Coupled with his solid thinking of configuration, he understood it without any obstacles. That was why he was able to construct a simple and crude sand table model that possessed substantial meaning. He even took it a step further and assembled the deep blue walker to carry out even more concrete experiments. At this moment, dozens of syncopators were flowing up and down inside and outside the empty exoskeleton armor that Meng Chong was standing face to face with. It was very lively. A syncopator was circling around Luonan's body as he drew closer to the deep blue walker. This scene looked a bit strange, so much so that Meng Chong, who originally wanted to say a few more words, unconsciously pursed his lips. His breathing also became quite a bit slower. Luonan attentively watched the back armor of the deep blue walker, allowing the two syncopators to flow. Changing modes to converge allowed the incorporeal exchange of energy and information between him and the deep blue walker to manifest in a relatively direct manner. In the heavenly Yuan Empire, the syncopators were primarily used as a medium for the jade crystal array. They were used to make up for the risk of releasing soul strength outside of the body. Here, Luonan relied on his accumulation of configuration and spirituality to turn them into a versatile auxiliary tool. They were used to make up for the physical structure and extended functions of the virtual component. And after researching the relevant information of Lieutenant Go Ye's fantasy mimicry technique, Luonan was no longer limited to the level of mechanical constructs. He was moving toward the field of bionics and even more expansive. For example, he could simulate himself. The cold and hard outer shell of the deep blue walker that had yet to be painted faintly lit up with a glimmer. Without Luonan's command, Meng Chong, who was still standing in his original position, subconsciously blinked his eyes. Beads of blood seeped out from the cracked corners of his eyes that had yet to heal. But this didn't hinder his senses. Block fire? The standard array was a two-person combination. There were no problems. Luonan used the work area of his left eye's virtual vision to mark out the experimental form. This was clearly a habit he had cultivated in the relay station. When working outdoors, the virtual vision was more convenient than the projected work area. Just now, he had used the support of the syncopators to simulate the state of Luonan, the rookie recruit and Liang Luchu's partner. Of course, this was the appearance of the simulation in the relay station environment. He didn't stop there. He continued to simulate the changes. The light on the armor was somewhat reserved, but the pulsation frequency was higher. It was accumulating considerable explosive power. This time it was the standard sub-3 type array. This was Luonan's state after he temporarily joined Mobile Squad 9. Of course, he wasn't satisfied with a single individual simulation. Instead, he sought the experience of collective strength. Buzz buzz buzz. A portion of the two syncopators began to show irregular disturbances, but they were soon diverted by the other syncopators. They dissipated into nothingness with a wave of vibration. Next, the front lines. Bang 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 bang. At least a third of the syncopators exploded just as the energy changed. They weren't able to injure Luonan and Meng Chong, but the outer armor of the deep blue walker rang with clanking sounds. Luonan laughed bitterly. Sure enough, it still wouldn't work. Sir Xuanhuan and Lieutenant Lu Andy used their individual bodies to converge the vast power of the relay station and the standard array of over 10,000 soldiers and soldiers. They were undoubtedly on the level of a senior lord. Even though Luonan was able to grasp a bit of the train of thought of the collective configuration, there was a world of difference in the base number of units from a single deep blue walker and the crude models that followed it. Without a foundation, there was no way to talk about structures, levels, or leaps. Yes, this was the predicament of not being able to find an upstream supplier. Should I think of another method? The syncopators seemed to be pretty much ruined. Luonan scratched his head. He prepared to clean up the mess, but he saw Meng Chong staring at him. What's wrong? The order isn't interested? Meng Chong shook his head. The beads of blood from the corner of his eyes flew off to who knows where. At the same time he tried to lean forward with his ramrod straight body. He was a bit embarrassed but he was more serious. I was just thinking, I don't understand Sir's teachings. I might not be able to convey them properly. Otherwise, Sir could come to the order to teach and let the members of the order see Sir's graceful bearing. It was really hard for Meng Chong to say these half-literate words. Luo Nan discussed the matter as it stood. You don't understand? Which part? This? If it was possible, Meng Chong naturally hoped that Luo Nan would speak from beginning to end. It would be best if he could speak until Meng Chong completely understood. Of course, it would be even better if Meng Chong could directly tell him the standard answer. Luo Nan could roughly guess Meng Chong's thoughts from his expression. He was just about to speak when a communication wave from several thousand kilometers away gave him another disturbance. This number was very unfamiliar. Luo Nan didn't want to pick it up, but he considered the special times they were in. He hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello, who's this? Meng Chong had already thought of an excuse, but he could only shut his mouth when he saw Luo Nan like this. A voice that didn't ring a bell was transmitted to D City through Luo Nan's sensing channel. Chief Luo, this is Xianxia. Xianxia? The voice sounded unfamiliar but it also sounded a bit familiar. The other party should be able to sense the doubt and alienation in Luo Nan's tone, but his attitude was still very proper. Yes, Chief. I'm a student of the Scavenger Project team. I'm currently in charge of the detection and sensing module. This time, Luo Nan didn't wait for the other party to finish speaking. He dug out this person from his memories. Fortunately, he had just discussed this project team with Zhang Yingying. It was spicy and fragrant. His memories were in an active state. Yes, you're the assistant designer and internal tester. The one who nearly lost his life in the last accident? Yes, Chief. It's me. Xianxia's reaction was quite pleasant. Luo Nan had an impression of this person because this fellow was an active member. He had a rich background in military research and experiments. He often had some insights and his temperament was jumpy. He was very courageous. He dared to upload any temporary designs into the Bloodwill Rings fortress. He had caused over a dozen accidents, big and small. Last month, the project team had been collectively trapped in the Bloodwill Rings fortress. Luo Nan's mind had wandered to D City at the time, and he wasn't able to deal with it in time. Something big almost happened. It was said that this fellow was the instigator, a typical troublemaker. However, Luo Nan heard that Gao Tianshi and Papercut had a good impression of him. It was fine as long as Luo Nan knew who this person was. In name, this person was his subordinate. Luo Nan continued to chat. Why, are you looking for me? Xianxia's voice grew more and more excited. It was to the point that his words were a bit incoherent. It's like this, Chief. I'm currently undergoing safety training in D City. It's the cause of the last accident. I just heard that you're here. Can I follow you for a period of time and listen to your teachings? Oh, I'm not saying that I want you to specially teach me. I just want to learn your configuration theory. I won't take up too much of your time. Just treat me as an orderly. What the heck? Luo Nan had some thoughts before. He thought that Xia City's military and political system had reacted quickly and came looking for him to discuss cooperation. Now it sounded like it was completely different. That's right. The government's reaction would always be a bit slow, right? Luo Nan thought for a moment and asked, how did you know I was in D City? Sorry, Chief. News is flying everywhere right now. It's coming from every level? Xianxia's words were a bit hesitant. His words were quite subtle. It seemed that he was hinting at something. Plus, he displayed the appearance of an admirer, but his words and actions were a bit subtly out of tune. Luo Nan had a general grasp of this. He thought about this person's background. Regardless of whether it was true or false, this was at least a relatively interesting beginning. Plus, he kept the communications open. His gaze swept over the simple model of the smoke and the beach. A few seconds later he spoke again. How many people do you have? I'm saying how many ability users can you gather? Military, government, and all sorts of people. How many do you have? Chapter 955. It was 5 o'clock in the morning in Xia City. He Donglu rarely got up at this hour in 10 years. Yes, it was also because he had a family dinner last night. It was rare for him to spend a night at home, so he naturally couldn't stay for long. He casually tidied himself up and tiptoed out. The house he Donglu was in was the residence of his grandfather, the former commander-in-chief of the Air Force, General He Chong. After the old man retired, he always stayed at home, doing some inexplicable research. He was close to a state where he didn't step out of his house. The old man felt that this was pretty good. It was just that active members of the grandchildren generation like Donglu had it tough. They would be brought back for 1 or 2 days a week to be educated. They wanted to play big, but they had to be overcautious and indecisive. It was very unpleasant. He had gotten used to it over the years. As he grew older, Donglu also learned how to adjust. When doing things, one had to learn how to first restrain and then release. First hold back and then feel good. One had to adjust the threshold of excitement. Like this, he could fly again for the next week. 5 minutes is up. Donglu sent a message to his bodyguard, Old C, and yawned again. He followed the safe route he had already chosen and walked downstairs. The house was quiet. After turning a corner, the courtyard corridor and the courtyard became one. The lights in the courtyard and the extremely weak first rays of dawn on the horizon were taken in together. They blended together with the light that seeped through a crack in the door of a room on the other side, forming a distinct color. What the hell? Donglu suddenly stopped. At this moment, the continuous vibrations in the air reverted to a vague voice in his ears. The old man's voice was full of energy, but it was a bit clearer in comparison. At least Donglu could hear it immediately. It didn't make sense. Donglu subconsciously sized up his surroundings. He was sure that this was the safe route he had chosen. The old man was old. He slept short and light. He woke up early every day, but he would usually walk in circles in the small courtyard on the other side, practicing boxing. What was he doing in the greenhouse and sunroom until the sun was high up in the sky? Young Master Lu, the unexpected greeting made Donglu's chest thump. The hair on the back of his head stood on end. He suppressed the scream with great difficulty and turned his head. He saw the old man's professional bodyguard, Old Zhang. He didn't know when he had appeared behind him. This old bodyguard was said to be even older than the old man. He had followed the old man for nearly half his life and was a true confidant. He was also a person who had almost become a demon. Donglu truly felt apprehensive in his heart. He forced a smile. Uncle Zhang, my grandfather woke up early enough. It was said that the old man was seriously considering it. He was truly insane. Speaking of which, although Donglu's position in the family was that of a big silk pants, this coarse kid in front of him could knock him out of the hallway with his brute strength. However, due to his rich love history and uncommon aesthetics, he had accumulated quite a few people over the years. There were also quite a few brainless fans in the family. The kid in front of him was one of them. It was just that today this kid's brainlessness truly wasn't the right time or place. No matter how Donglu tried to stop him, it was still too late in the end. On the other side of the sunroom, the sound of footsteps could be heard after a while. The half-closed door opened, and Boijing appeared at the doorway. His round face, which had always been regarded as amiable by outsiders, was currently stiff. He didn't give his son a good expression. You come here. Donglu inwardly cursed, I'm done for. Then he fiercely glared at Dongliang. The latter also knew that he had stirred up trouble. He stuck out his tongue and was about to turn around. Who knew that the old man in the sunroom would raise his voice? All of you come over and accept the mission. Yes, Commander. Dongliang was a hothead in the end. With a roar, he walked over with vigor and vigor. Donglu increasingly had no reason to refuse. He could only brace himself and walk towards the sunroom under his old man's cold gaze. Just as he arrived at the doorway, he heard the old man's chuckle. Little bastard, you've persisted for more than half a year, right? Your willpower is up to standard. Who are you going to find to learn skills from? Of course I have to find someone with great ability. We also have such conditions. Dongliang puffed out his chest and belly full of confidence. Chong grinned and laughed heartily. His mouth was wide, his nose was straight and his face was rosy. Although he was nearly 90 years old, he still had a lot of black hair and his body was still very robust. In his early years, he had experienced the aberration in the 3 wars. His family had died early, and he only married and had children for the second time when he was almost 50 years old. As a result, most of his grandchildren were still young. Truthfully speaking, he rather doted on them. Especially a hothead like Dongliang, who was the most to his liking. Therefore he deliberately teased him. You want to smash your old man's little treasury? Dongliang snorted disdainfully. In this day and age, how many capable people can use money to smash things? Chong was greatly amused. That's right. Little Dongliang's idea is the best. It seems you have a plan. That's right. There's no need to beg others. When I get back, I'll mention it to Sister Yuan. Isn't my brother-in-law in the palm of my hand? Donglu let out a pft, but he suddenly felt something was wrong.